A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Alara, standing a little apart, felt no surprise, only a grim, cold certainty. Her heart, which had once shattered into 1,000 pieces when she first saw this scene in her previous life, was now an unyielding stone. She remembered the 2 years she'd waited, starving, scraping by, even selling her mother's last silver locket to support Damien's aspirations, all while he'd secretly married Lyra in the city. She remembered the frostbite that had turned her fingers black, the hacking cough that had stolen her breath, the lonely, freezing death in a dilapidated countryside hut, far from any doctor, while Damien and Lyra built their life. Now, as Lyra gasped, a single grateful tear tracing a path down her cheek, and Damien offered a paternal pat on her shoulder, Alara felt only disgust. He truly was a master of performance, cloaking his selfishness in the garb of benevolence. Just then, an elderly man in a neat, if slightly worn, military uniform stepped forward, his eyes scanning the hushed crowd before settling on Alara. "Excuse me," he announced, his voice carrying surprising authority. "Is Alara Vance present?" Alara stepped forward, her plain cotton jacket doing little to conceal her innate grace. "I am." The old man nodded. "I am Captain Joe. I'm here on behalf of Major General Kalen Vance's family. As you know, our general was grievously wounded in action and requires constant specialized care. His family has sought an honest, capable young woman to assist him. In return for a marriage of convenience and 2 years of dedicated service, she will receive urban registration, a comfortable residence, and a pension. The general wishes for a woman of strong character, not easily swayed by gossip or hardship. We believe you fit the description." He looked pointedly at Damien and Lyra. "Our proposal stands." The square erupted. A marriage of convenience to a disabled war hero? For an urban registration? No one had seen this coming. Whispers of shameless opportunist and pity marriage began to snake through the crowd, directed at Alara. Damien, for once, looked genuinely stunned, his carefully constructed facade of nobility cracking. Alara met Captain Joe's gaze, then turned to Damien, a faint, chilling smile playing on her lips. "Damien Thorne," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the murmurs. "Your selfless act of giving away a quota that was never truly yours to give, especially after I sold my mother's heirloom for your studies, is truly touching. But I have no further need of your charity or your promises." She turned her gaze to Lyra, whose face had gone from tearful to a sickly white. "And Lyra, may your delicate health bring you all the blessings you so richly deserve." Then, she turned back to Captain Joe, her head held high. "Captain, please inform General Vance that I accept his proposal. I will marry Kalen Vance." The silence that followed was deafening. Damien took a stumbling step forward, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Lyra, meanwhile, looked as if she might faint, her feigned weakness finally becoming all too real. "Excellent," Captain Joe said, a rare smile touching his lips. He offered Alara a respectful nod. "We shall make the arrangements immediately. Welcome to the Vance family, Miss Alara." Alara offered him a small, firm smile. She cast one last, contemptuous glance at the pale, gaping faces of Damien and Lyra, then turned and walked away with Captain Joe, leaving behind the stunned crowd and the ruins of a past she was determined to erase. Her new life, forged in defiance, had just begun. Taking a deep breath, Alara broke the silence. "I understand the circumstances of our arrangement," she began, choosing her words carefully, "and I understand your reservations. However, I propose we approach this pragmatically." Kalen turned his head slowly, his dark eyes narrowing. "Pragmatically?" he scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "What could be pragmatic about this farce?" "A contract," Alara continued, ignoring his sarcasm, "for 2 years. During this time, I will fulfill the duties of a wife, caring for this home, preparing meals, assisting you as needed. In return, I gain the urban registration. After 2 years, we can divorce. You will be free of any obligation, and I will have my independence. Her tone was even devoid of sentimentality, almost businesslike. She laid out her terms not as a plea, but as an undeniable offer. Kalen stared at her, genuinely surprised. His expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable replacing the open disdain. No tears, no feigned sweetness, no declarations of duty or fabricated affection. Just cold, hard terms. It was so unexpected, so direct, that it momentarily disarmed him. He had anticipated a simpering, manipulative woman. Instead, he found a negotiator. "A contract marriage?" he murmured, testing the words. "You expect me to believe you're doing this out of practicality alone? What else would it be?" Alara challenged gently, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "I have no illusions, and I imagine neither do you. This is a mutually beneficial arrangement. You gain a caretaker without the commitment of genuine marriage, and I gain my freedom from the countryside and a chance at a new life. It's a fair trade." He studied her, his gaze intense, as if trying to discern a hidden motive. Yet her eyes held only a quiet resolve. He pondered, the lines on his forehead deepening. The offer was logical. His pride recoiled at the idea of a transactional relationship, but his body, his weary mind, craved the simple care she offered. The thought of enduring 2 years of pity or forced cheerfulness was unbearable. But her proposition felt different. It was stark, honest in its lack of pretense. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his injuries, he nodded. "Agreed," he rasped, the single word a grudging acceptance. 2 years. "Good," Alara said, a quiet sense of victory blooming within her. The first hurdle cleared. She then set to work, her movements efficient and purposeful. She found a broom and a dustpan, making quick work of the layers of grime. The windows, once opaque with neglect, began to sparkle under her ministrations, allowing the weak winter light to finally stream into the room. She boiled water, found some dried herbs, and brewed a comforting, if simple, tea. Kalen watched her, an unreadable expression on his face, as the dust motes danced in the newly visible light. The stale air slowly began to clear, replaced by the faint, clean scent of water and old wood. Without a word, Alara had begun to reclaim the space, not for herself, but for the possibility of life within it. His silent observation was the first tentative bridge between them, built not on words, but on the quiet, undeniable promise of change. The next morning, after serving Kalen a simple but nourishing breakfast of millet porridge and salted vegetables, Alara approached him where he sat by the window, staring out at the stark winter landscape. His profile was sharp, almost hawkish, etched with a severity that seemed to ward off the world. "Kalen," she began, her voice steady, not faltering at the wall of his silence. "Your legs. We need to start working on them." He stiffened, his gaze still fixed on the outside world, but his knuckles tightened on the arms of his wheelchair. "There's no need," he bit out, his voice low and gruff, a raw edge of resentment underlying the words. "It's useless." Alara knelt beside the wheelchair, ignoring his dismissive tone. Her eyes, clear and unwavering, met his profile. "Perhaps, but useless is a verdict delivered by those who haven't tried everything. Have you tried everything, Kalen?" He finally turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers. They were filled with a profound weariness, but also a flicker of something sharp, challenging. "What do you know of it? Of what I've tried? Of the doctors, the specialists, the endless, agonizing hope that only led to more despair?" His voice rose slightly, laced with a bitterness that spoke of battles lost, not on the field, but within his own body. The very idea of someone else, especially a woman he barely knew, presuming to understand his suffering, was an affront to his pride, a fresh wound to his already shredded dignity. He, Kalen Vance, a decorated general, reduced to this charity case, tended by a stranger. The humiliation was a raw, burning ember in his gut. "I know what I've seen," Alara replied calmly, her gaze not dropping. "And I know that despair is a choice. powerful one, yes, but still a choice. Give me 2 weeks. If there's no change, I won't bother you about it again." Kalen scoffed, a humorless sound. "And what precisely do you intend to do, Alara? Wave a magic wand? You are not a doctor. You are a farmer's daughter." His words were meant to wound, to remind her of her place, of their disparate backgrounds. He expected her to flinch, to retreat, but she simply regarded him with that same unreadable composure. "I have nimble hands and a good memory," Alara said, her tone utterly devoid of offense. "And I've studied a few things. Basic therapeutic massage. It can improve circulation, strengthen muscles, alleviate atrophy." She moved to the back of the wheelchair, her hands gentle but firm as she unbuttoned the cuffs of his trousers and carefully, slowly, rolled them up. Kalen tensed, every muscle in his body rigid with resistance. He wanted to push her away, to shout, to retreat into the shell he had built around himself. His legs, pale and alarmingly thin, were a source of deep shame. He hadn't allowed anyone to touch them, to see them, in months. His pride, which had once driven him through enemy lines and led his men to victory, now trapped him, making him fear vulnerability more than death. The touch of her fingers, so light yet persistent, felt like a trespass, a violation of his private despair. He could feel the blood rushing to his face, his jaw clenching. He closed his eyes, wishing himself anywhere but here. But Alara persisted, her movements methodical and respectful. Her touch was warm, not clinical, not pitying, but simply present. She began to knead the flesh of his calves, tracing the contours of his atrophied muscles. Her fingers were surprisingly strong, finding knots and tight spots with an intuitive precision. Kalen wanted to protest, but the unexpected sensation, a dull ache that mingled with a strange, almost forgotten relief, kept him silent. He found himself involuntarily relaxing, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in his tense posture. He hated it. He hated that she was doing this, hated that it felt not entirely terrible. Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the small house, followed by the clatter of the front door opening without an invitation. Mrs. Liu, the compound's resident busybody, bustled in, her eyes, sharp and acquisitive, immediately landing on Alara's bent back and Kalen's exposed legs. "Alara, dear, I was just passing by. Thought I'd see if you needed anything." My, what's going on here?" Mrs. Liu's voice, though outwardly cheerful, dripped with a barely concealed curiosity and judgment. Her gaze flickered between Alara and Kalen, her expression a potent mix of feigned concern and thinly veiled glee at having stumbled upon such a juicy scene. "Such a brave young woman you are, touching. Well, poor General Vance." Her words, carefully chosen, implied both Alara's supposed ignorance and Kalen's irreversible brokenness. She made no attempt to hide the pity in her eyes for Kalen, which was a poison, a corrosive insult to his remaining pride. Kalen's eyes snapped open, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over him. To be seen like this, vulnerable, helpless, with a woman a stranger, a contract wife massaging his withered limbs, and then to have Mrs. Liu's prying eyes and clucking tongue, it was unbearable. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to lash out. Alara slowly straightened, turning to face Mrs. Liu. Her hands, however, remained gently on Kalen's calf. Her expression was calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to Mrs. Liu's theatrical dramatics. "Good morning, Mrs. Liu," Alara said, her voice even, with a subtle undertone of steel. "As you can see, I'm giving Kalen a massage. I understand it can be quite beneficial for improving blood flow and muscle strength." A heavy silence descended, broken only by the crackling of the small fire in the hearth. Alara turned back to Kalen, resuming her massage as if nothing had happened. Kalen, however, was no longer looking at the window. He was staring at Alara, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of shock, grudging admiration, and a faint, almost imperceptible spark of something else. No one had ever defended him like that, not directly, not so publicly, and certainly not with such quiet, lethal precision. His gaze dropped to her hands, which continued their work with unwavering focus. The humiliation of his legs being touched was still there, but it was now overlaid with a different emotion, a new layer of complexity. She had seen him at his weakest, and then she had defended him, protected his dignity without him even asking. After a few more moments of silence, as Alara gently manipulated the muscles around his knee, a rough whisper escaped Kalen's lips. "Thank you," he murmured, the words almost swallowed by the quiet room. It was cold, hesitant, barely audible, but it was there. His first genuine, albeit reluctant, acknowledgement of her. Alara merely nodded, her focus still on his legs. But Kalen could feel it, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the icy wall that had encased his heart for so long. A tiny chip of the despair-forged armor had fallen away, leaving a sliver of him exposed to a warmth he hadn't known he desperately craved. The tiny chip that had fallen from Kalen's armor was barely perceptible, a fleeting flicker in the depths of his dark eyes when Alara, unasked, had laid out a clean, pressed uniform for him, simply stating, "It's time to face the day, General Vance." Her tone was neither solicitous nor demanding, just a plain statement of fact, a quiet assumption of order in their shared, chaotic life. He hadn't thanked her then, couldn't bring himself to form the words, but he had worn the uniform, and the mere act of doing so had felt like a small, almost painful reclaiming of himself. Alara's care was a steady, unyielding tide against the wreckage of his existence. Each morning, the scent of brewed grain and something savory, a mixture of herbs and vegetables he couldn't quite identify, would waft from the small kitchen. She cooked with a quiet efficiency, her movements precise, her attention unwavering. The meals themselves were simple yet robust and surprisingly delicious, far removed from the bland, institutional fare he'd grown accustomed to, or the haphazard, half-hearted attempts of the compound's previous cooks. She never fussed, never asked if he liked it, simply placed the plate before him and then, just as quietly, ate her own. But he noticed. He noticed the way the food was always warm, the way she peeled the fruit for him, cutting it into manageable pieces, even when he could easily do it himself. It was a silent language of concern, utterly devoid of the pity he abhorred. In the afternoons, Alara would busy herself with tasks, mending his worn clothes with surprisingly skilled hands, polishing the dusty wooden furniture until it gleamed, or tending to the small, neglected patch of earth outside that she was slowly transforming into a vegetable garden. She wasn't just bringing order to his house. She was breathing life back into it, one quiet, determined act at a time. Kalen would watch her from his wheelchair, sometimes for hours, his gaze tracking her movements, his mind a turbulent sea of gratitude and resentment. Gratitude for the undeniable comfort she brought, resentment for the uncomfortable truth that he needed it, that he needed her. Evenings were dedicated to his legs. The initial sessions had been fraught with his silent fury. His teeth clenched against the humiliation, but Alara had remained unperturbed. Her touch was firm yet gentle, her hands surprisingly strong as she worked through the atrophied muscles. She'd meticulously apply warm compresses, then slowly, painstakingly, begin the therapeutic massage she claimed to have learned from an old village healer. He remembered her calm, steady voice explaining basic anatomy and the principles of circulation, her words surprisingly precise for someone without formal medical training. He'd scoffed internally, yet found himself listening, his mind grudgingly acknowledging her earnestness. Over the past weeks, the physical pain of the massages had lessened, replaced by a deep, aching warmth that permeated his limbs. He found himself anticipating them, a forbidden hope flickering in the dark corners of his mind. He'd even started to speak, hesitant at first, offering clipped answers to her neutral observations about the weather or the day's tasks. Alara, for her part, never pushed. She'd listen patiently, her intelligent eyes meeting his without judgment, and then offer a concise, thoughtful response. They talked of mundane things, of the compound's trivial happenings, of the stories in the newspapers she read aloud, of the changes she saw in the garden. Small, tentative bridges were being built across the chasm of his despair. One particularly humid evening, as a soft rain drummed against the window pane, Alara was working on his right calf. Her thumbs pressed into the muscle just below the knee, kneading with a focused intensity. Kalen lay on the cot, his eyes closed, the familiar ache a dull throb in his leg. He was mentally replaying a tactical exercise from his past, a way to distract himself from the stark reality of his present. Alara's breath was soft, even. The air was thick with the scent of a liniment she used, a mixture of herbs she'd gathered herself. Suddenly, a jolt, a sharp, involuntary contraction of the muscle beneath Alara's skilled hands. Kalen's eyes flew open, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't a spasm of pain, but something else. A twitch, a distinct, unmistakable movement. Alara froze, her hands still on his leg, her gaze fixed on his calf. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain and their ragged breaths. Kalen stared, wide-eyed, disbelieving. Had he imagined it? No, it was real. He felt it. A faint tremor, a ghost of muscle memory stirring from its long slumber. After the session, as Alara was tidying the compresses, the question finally broke free from Kalen, raw and unbidden. His voice was hoarse, filled with a vulnerability he hadn't allowed himself in years. He watched her straighten, her back to him, as he pushed the words out, each one heavy with the weight of his past, his pride, his confusion. Alara, he began, then paused, clearing his throat. Why are you so good to me? She turned slowly, her eyes calm and unwavering. She didn't offer a platitude, nor did she shy away. Instead, a flicker of something profoundly ancient and weary, yet resilient, passed through her gaze. It wasn't pity, but understanding. A deep, quiet empathy that somehow transcended their present circumstances. She simply looked at him, truly looked at the broken man in the wheelchair, and a profound silence descended, pregnant with unspoken truths. The unspoken understanding that had settled between Alara and Kalen that night became the bedrock for the arduous journey ahead. From that day, the quiet routine of their lives transformed into a grueling regimen of physical therapy, meticulously planned by Alara. She'd spent countless nights poring over borrowed medical texts from the compound's small clinic, her brow furrowed in concentration, mapping out exercises, understanding muscle groups, and devising strategies to stimulate Kalen's atrophied limbs. Her determination was a silent force, unwavering and absolute. Every morning, the small living room became Kalen's battlefield. Alara would gently, yet firmly, guide him through stretches, the air often thick with Kalen's grunts of pain and Alara's soft, encouraging words. His legs, once powerful pillars of a warrior, now felt alien, unresponsive, burdened by a leaden inertia. Sweat beaded on Kalen's forehead, tracing paths down his sharp cheekbones, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles bulged. There were days, many of them, when the despair threatened to swallow him whole. His eyes, usually deep and dark, would cloud with a familiar, hopeless resignation. "It's useless, Alara," he would rasp, his voice raw with frustration, pushing her hands away. This is a waste of your time. My time." The words were infused with the profound humiliation of a man who had once been invincible, now reduced to helplessness. It was in these moments that Alara's true strength shone. She never yelled, never preached. Instead, she'd kneel beside him, meeting his gaze with an unwavering calm. "Is it, General Vance?" she'd ask softly, her tone laced with a gentle challenge. "Or is it simply harder than you imagined? You are Kalen Vance. You faced countless enemies, endured unimaginable trials on the battlefield. Are these muscles truly your greatest adversary?" Her words, sharp and precise, were like a cold compress to his burning despair. They didn't coddle. They reminded him of his own formidable will. She'd then recount a small, almost imperceptible twitch she'd noticed in his left calf just yesterday, a tiny flicker of life that only her dedicated touch had registered. "It's there, Kalen. The fight is still in you. We just need to find it again." Her faith in him, quiet but absolute, was a tether pulling him back from the brink, forcing him to confront not just his physical pain, but his shattered pride. Slowly, painstakingly, a change began. The initial sessions, where Kaelin could barely move a toe, gave way to moments of controlled flexion. Alara, her hands calloused from the constant massaging and supporting, celebrated every millimeter of movement, every flicker of sensation. She would prop him against the sturdy wooden frame of the door, his arms trembling as he bore his weight for mere seconds. The first time he stood, supported by Alara's strong grip around his waist, the sheer effort contorted his face, but a triumphant glint sparked in his eyes. It was a victory, small in the grand scheme, but monumental in their confined world. The metallic tang of sweat and triumph filled the air. News, as always, traveled fast in the compound, especially through the relentless grapevine maintained by Mrs. Liu. Initially, her pronouncements had been of Alara's foolishness, of her doomed efforts with that cripple. But as weeks turned into months and sounds of exertion, sometimes even Kaelin's muffled roars of effort, emanated from their home, a seed of doubt began to sprout. Then came the day Mrs. Liu, peeking from behind her curtains, saw Kaelin. His face slick with sweat, his body shaking, take a single agonizing step, supported by Alara, across his living room. Her jaw dropped, nearly unhinging. The gossip quickly shifted from scorn to astonishment, then to a grudging, then open respect for Alara. She wasn't just a calculating wife seeking an urban registration. She was a miracle worker, a woman of steel and infinite patience, who had achieved what the doctors had deemed impossible. The compound residents, once dismissive, now looked at Alara with a mixture of awe and reverence. Kaelin's progress accelerated. The steps became 2, then 3, then a shuffling gait with crutches. Each evening, after Alara had helped him back into his chair, exhausted but exhilarated, he would reach for her hand, his fingers clasping hers, a silent testament to their shared battle. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. He spoke of his past, of the battles he'd fought, the men he'd lost, the gnawing guilt that had haunted his recovery. Alara listened, not with pity, which he would have loathed, but with understanding, sharing her own quiet observations about life, about resilience. The contract marriage, once a pragmatic shield, began to crumble, replaced by a warmth that seeped into the very foundations of their home. A trust, deeper than any spoken vow, was forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. One afternoon, a military jeep, its olive drab paint dulled by dust, pulled up outside their small house. A stern-faced, grizzled man, Major General Chun, Kaelin's former commander, stepped out. He was a man of few words, known for his uncompromising standards and a gaze that could cut through lies. He had come to pay his respects, expecting to see a broken man, confined to shadows. What he found instead was Kaelin, standing by the window, albeit leaning heavily on crutches, his back straighter than Chun had dared to hope. Alara was by his side, her hand hovering near his arm, ready to steady him, her presence a silent, powerful anchor. General Chen's eyes, which had seen too much war, widened imperceptibly. He stopped dead in his tracks, a flicker of raw emotion crossing his usually impassive face. He clapped Kaelin on the shoulder, a rare smile creasing his weathered face. "Vance," he boomed, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd see this day. Your reports were grim, son. But it seems you've defied all odds." He turned his gaze to Alara, a profound respect dawning in his eyes, recognizing the quiet strength that had accomplished this feat. "And you, young woman, you are a miracle worker." He then made the offer, direct and without preamble, addressing Kaelin, but with a respectful nod to Alara. "The regiment needs men like you, Vance. The front office is a mess, but if you're up for it, there's a place for you. Not on the battlefield. Not yet, but your mind, your leadership, it's invaluable." Kaelin's eyes met Alara's. In them, he saw not just pride, but a profound, unwavering belief in him, a reflection of the hope she had nurtured when his own had withered. He turned back to General Chun, a new resolve hardening his features, the fire of his old self reignited. "General," he said, his voice strong, resonant with newfound purpose. "I accept." The words were a declaration, not just of his return to service, but of his return to life. That night, as the last light faded from the sky, casting long, soft shadows across their small home, Kalen turned to Alara. He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing the calluses on her palm, a map of her tireless devotion. "Alara," he began, his voice rough with emotion, I was wrong about you, about everything." The admission was hard one, but utterly sincere. "You didn't just heal my legs. You healed me." His eyes, so often shadowed, were now clear, reflecting a depth of feeling that stunned her, a vulnerability he had never shown. "This contract, it's meaningless now, isn't it?" Alara's heart swelled. The pragmatism that had been her shield and sword against a cruel world now felt utterly unnecessary in the face of his raw honesty, his burgeoning love. She looked at him, truly seeing the man he had become, strong, vulnerable, and utterly hers. "Yes, Kalen," she whispered, tears blurring her vision, a quiet joy blooming in her chest. "It is." He pulled her gently towards him, his embrace tentative at first, then firm, as if holding on to the most precious thing he had ever known, a treasure he had almost lost. They spoke no more of contracts, of terms, of 2 years. The distance between their beds, a silent testament to their initial arrangement, suddenly felt vast and illogical, a relic of a past that no longer defined them. Later that night, without a word, guided by an unspoken understanding that transcended their previous agreement, Alara moved her meager belongings to Kalen's room. The contract was not just broken. It was lovingly dissolved, giving way to a union forged in shared pain, unwavering support, and an undeniable love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places. The general had risen, not just from his chair, but from the ashes of his despair, all thanks to the quiet strength of the woman beside him. Their new life truly had begun. The door to their room, once a stark boundary, now stood perpetually ajar, a testament to the trust and affection that had blossomed between Alara and Kalen. His recovery had not only healed his body but had reawakened his spirit, imbuing him with a quiet strength that hummed beneath his reserved demeanor. Their evenings were no longer spent in strained silence, but in companionable quiet, sometimes punctuated by soft laughter or the murmur of shared dreams. Kalen, now upright and commanding, often found his gaze lingering on Alara, a silent promise in his deep, dark eyes that spoke of a future far removed from the cold contract they had initially forged. Meanwhile, in the bustling, unforgiving city, Damien Thorne was experiencing a very different kind of rebirth, a painful, humiliating unraveling. The grand promises Lyra Sterling had whispered in his ear had curdled into bitter accusations. Her superficial charm had dissolved under the pressure of city life, revealing a greedy, demanding nature that quickly alienated the few connections Damien had managed to cultivate. His supposed brilliant business ventures, conceived in arrogance and lacking any real foresight or diligent execution, floundered spectacularly. Without Alara's quiet support, her pragmatic advice, and the invisible buffer her gentle presence had provided against his own more unsavory impulses, Damien found himself exposed. He had lost not only the city quota but also his last vestige of social standing, clinging to a factory job that barely paid his rising debts. The divorce, a messy public affair initiated by Lyra once it became clear Damien was a sinking ship, had stripped him of the last remnants of his pride and what little money he had left. He was haggard, his once charming features now etched with lines of desperation, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights spent regretting, not Alara, not truly, but the comfortable life she had represented and the ease with which he had discarded it. He missed the version of himself he was when she was there, not her. This crucial distinction, of course, escaped him entirely. One brisk morning, a letter arrived at the compound, its envelope flimsy and stained, the handwriting frantic and barely legible. Alara recognized it instantly. Her heart, however, remained untouched by the usual tremor of old memories. Kalen, now dressed in a crisp uniform for his reinstatement, watched her with a keen, protective eye as she tore it open. The words tumbled onto the page in a torrent of self-pity and thinly veiled manipulation. Damien, the great orator of sincerity, blamed Lyra entirely for his misfortunes, painting himself as the innocent victim of a conniving woman. He spoke of his eternal love for Alara, how he had been blinded by ambition, but now saw the truth. He begged her to wait for him, to forgive him, to return to his side and help him rebuild, promising her a future he had already proven himself incapable of providing. He even dared to suggest that Kalen, that broken man, could never truly make her happy. Alara read it through, a faint, almost imperceptible curve playing on her lips. It wasn't amusement, but a chilling realization of how little he had changed. His self-absorption was a bottomless pit, his capacity for blame-shifting infinite. She looked at the smoldering embers in the hearth, then at Kalen, who had silently risen and was now standing beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a silent question in his gaze. "He thinks I'm still that girl," she murmured, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "The one who would wait, who would forgive, who would sacrifice everything for his potential." Without another word, she crumpled the letter into a tight ball. The paper was thin, the ink still fresh, yet its contents were ancient history to her. She tossed it into the hearth. The flames licked greedily at the edges, consuming Damien's pathetic pleas, his false regrets, his desperate, self-serving promises. As the last of the ash curled upwards, Alara felt a profound sense of liberation, a final, definitive severing of the last flimsy thread that had connected her to that past life of pain and illusion. "Good," Kalen said, his voice a low rumble, his hand tightening reassuringly on her shoulder. The unspoken message was clear. Asterisk, he doesn't deserve you. You deserve better. Asterisk, with the ghosts of her past firmly laid to rest, Alara turned her formidable intellect and newfound freedom towards a different kind of construction. Her own future. She had always possessed an innate understanding of aesthetics and a practical eye for detail, skills honed in her past life. Observing the drab, utilitarian clothing worn by most people in the compound and the nearby town, a gap in the market became strikingly obvious. Why couldn't everyday wear be both practical and beautiful? Why couldn't it reflect individual personality? She began sketching designs in her spare time, simple yet elegant patterns that could be easily adapted. She focused on durable, high-quality fabrics, prioritizing comfort and style. Kalen, noticing her quiet dedication, offered his subtle support. He didn't question her ambition, didn't attempt to dissuade her from such a frivolous pursuit. Instead, he quietly pulled strings, leveraging his military connections to help her secure a small, disused storefront near the compound gates and to source quality materials at reasonable prices. Something nearly impossible for an unestablished woman to do alone in that era. He never took credit, never boasted. His support was like the sturdy foundation of a house, unseen but essential. Alara named her shop Alara's Haven. The opening was modest, announced by word of mouth and a few hand-painted signs. Yet, the moment the doors opened, women flocked in. Her designs, a breath of fresh air amidst the monotonous sea of uniforms and standardized outfits, were an instant hit. A simple cotton dress with an artfully placed pleat, a blouse with delicate embroidery, trousers cut for both comfort and elegance, each piece was a testament to her vision. She made sure her prices were fair, making quality fashion accessible. "It's not just clothes," a young woman gushed, trying on a vibrant skirt that swayed gracefully with her movements. It makes me feel like myself again. Not just a wife or a worker." Word spread like wildfire. Alara's Haven quickly became the talk of the town, then the neighboring towns. Orders poured in, overwhelming her small staff. Alara worked tirelessly, often late into the night, her mind buzzing with new ideas, new ways to expand. She hired local women, teaching them stitching and tailoring, empowering them with skills and independence. She was not just selling clothes. She was cultivating confidence, building a community, and forging her own path to financial autonomy. Damien Thorne, in his dim city flat, heard distant rumors of General Vance's wife and her little shop. He scoffed, dismissing it as a hobby, a trifle. He was too consumed by his own mounting failures to truly comprehend. His factory job crumbled, another casualty of his short-sightedness and inability to manage a workforce. He bounced from one low-paying, dead-end position to another, each failure deepening his despair and reinforcing his distorted belief that the world was unfairly conspiring against him. He never once connected his rapid descent to the moment he had discarded the quiet, resilient woman who had once, unknowingly, been his greatest asset. He was blind to the truth. Alara's departure had not just removed a person from his life. It had removed the very scaffolding that had propped up his ill-founded aspirations, leaving him to collapse under the weight of his own profound inadequacies. His downfall was not an act of cruel fate. It was the direct, undeniable consequence of losing Alara's wisdom, her steadfast support, and the sheer force of her moral character that had once, however indirectly, shielded him from himself. While Alara built her empire, brick by meticulously chosen brick, Damien's world crumbled, one self-inflicted blow at a time. The contrast was stark, undeniable, and utterly satisfying. The sharp rap on the door, unannounced and jarring, echoed through the peaceful afternoon quiet of the Vance residence. Alara, busy sorting through new fabric samples for her shop, paused, her brow furrowed. She glanced at Kalen, who was seated by the window, his attention typically absorbed in a military report. But now his deep-set eyes, ever vigilant, were fixed on the door. He'd heard the insolent knock too. Expecting anyone? Kalen's voice was low, a hint of steel beneath the calm. He'd fully recovered, his limp a distant memory, his bearing that of the formidable general he was becoming. The wheelchair that once defined him now gathered dust in a storeroom, a relic of a past defeat. Alara shook her head, a prickle of unease brushing against her. She moved towards the door, Kalen rising smoothly behind her, his presence a comforting shield. When she opened it, the afternoon light seemed to recoil from the figure standing on their porch. Damien Thorne. He was a ghost of his former self, far removed from the charming, if self-serving young man she had once loved. His clothes were rumpled, faded, and seemed to hang loosely on a frame that had grown thin and angular. A week's worth of stubble marred his jawline, and his eyes, once glinting with ambition, were now bloodshot, shadowed, and held a frantic, desperate glint. He looked as though he'd slept in the streets, a far cry from the factory manager he'd once boasted of becoming. A faint, unpleasant odor, a mix of stale sweat and cheap alcohol, wafted from him. Alara's nose wrinkled almost imperceptibly, a purely involuntary reaction. The sight of him was less a shock and more a confirmation of the cold, hard justice she had anticipated. "Alara," he breathed, his voice hoarse, attempting a smile that twisted into a grotesque grimace. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes darting past her to Kalen, who stood like an unmoving sentinel. I knew I'd find you here. I had to see you." Alara's gaze was cool, devoid of any warmth. "Damien," she stated, her tone flat, utterly impersonal. "To what do we owe this visit?" Her arms crossed over her chest, a silent barrier. Damien flinched, stung by her detachment. He ignored Kalen for a moment, focusing all his energy on Alara. "Lena, no. Alara, please, we need to talk. I've made a terrible mistake. A series of mistakes. Leaving you, marrying that viper Lyra. It was all a terrible, terrible mistake." He wrung his hands, his posture one of abject misery. "She poisoned everything. She was jealous of you, of us. She manipulated me. She drove me away from you, from true happiness." Alara felt a wave of profound weariness. His familiar song and dance of blaming others, of playing the victim. It hadn't changed. "Lyra was your choice, Damien," she said, her voice steady. "Just as I was not." "No, no, you don't understand," he cried, taking another step, trying to bridge the distance. I was confused, weak, but I've learned my lesson. Oh, Alara, I've lost everything. The factory went under. Lyra left me for some petty official once my money ran out. My reputation is in tatters. I have nothing, nowhere to go. My parents, they won't even look at me. He looked truly broken, a man stripped bare. And yet, there was no pity in Alara's heart, only a cold recognition of consequences. And you think that's my problem? She asked, a sliver of ice in her tone. Your choices led you here, not mine. Kalen stepped forward then, his presence radiating quiet authority. You've said your piece, Thorn. Now leave. His voice was calm, but each word was a command, carrying the weight of his rank and his unshakable resolve. Damien finally turned his full, bloodshot gaze on Kalen, a flicker of old jealousy igniting in his eyes. And you, he sneered, a desperate bravado suddenly surfacing. Still hiding behind a woman, Vance? I hear you got your legs back. A miracle, they say. Or did Alara just feel sorry for you, you cripple? Did she just take you on as a charity case to get her city registration? His voice rose, laced with a bitter, envious venom. Don't you see, Alara? He's a broken man. He always will be. He's damaged goods. You're too good for him. You always were too good for me, too. But at least I'm whole. He gestured wildly at himself, as if his physical wholeness, devoid of any moral integrity, was a virtue. Alara felt a sudden, sharp surge of anger, not just for Kalen, but for the sheer audacity of this man, the gall to stand in her home and defile the genuine love and respect she and Kalen had built. She opened her mouth to speak, but Kalen's hand on her arm, a silent command, stopped her. Kalen's eyes were fixed on Damien, devoid of emotion, yet piercing. Damien Thorn, he said, his voice dropping, gaining an almost chilling resonance. Let me be clear. Alara is my wife, my partner, the light of my life. She chose me, not out of pity, but out of a strength and a wisdom you could never comprehend. She healed me, not just my legs, but my spirit. And for that I will be eternally grateful. And I will protect her, and our home with my life. He took a step closer to Damien, who instinctively recoiled. You lost her, Thorn, because you were never worthy of her. You never saw her worth beyond what she could give you. That is your tragedy, not hers. Now, I suggest you remove yourself from my property before I have you forcibly removed. Alara, recovering quickly, felt the warmth of Kalen's hand on her back, his comforting presence. The nausea, though fleeting, had left a peculiar sensation, a tingling awareness. She looked from Damien's ravaged face to Kalen's worried one, and a slow, tender smile bloomed on her lips. Her hand, still resting on her abdomen, now moved with a deliberate, soft caress. I think, she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper, but clear enough for both men to hear in the sudden, tense silence. I think we might be having a baby. The words hung in the air, a bell tolling the end of one life and the joyous beginning of another. Kalen's eyes widened, then filled with an uncontainable light, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and overwhelming happiness. He looked at Alara, then down at her hand on her stomach, a smile breaking across his face, radiating a warmth that filled the entire porch, chasing away the cold shadows Damien had brought. He gently pulled her closer, his lips brushing her hair, a silent promise of endless love and protection. For Damien, the words were a death knell. A child, their child, not his, the last flickering ember of his delusional hope, that Alara might still, somehow, be waiting for him, that she might still regret their past, was brutally extinguished. He had not only lost her, but he had been utterly replaced. She had built a family, a true home with Kalen Vance, the very man he had so contemptuously dismissed. His jaw hung slack, his face a mask of utter devastation. The haggardness suddenly seemed to deepen, his desperation turning into a hollow, empty ache. He wanted to scream, to rail against the injustice, but the words choked in his throat, lost to the crushing weight of his own monumental failures. He was nothing, less than nothing. He stumbled back, one step, then another, his eyes fixed on the couple, who were now lost in their own world of burgeoning joy. He saw the genuine love, the shared future, the bright, undeniable happiness that was so utterly beyond his grasp. Without another word, a broken, defeated shell of a man, Damien Thorne turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, his steps dragging. He didn't look back, disappearing down the path, swallowed by the afternoon shadows. His desperate pleas had been shattered, his attempts to denigrate Kaelin rendered meaningless. He retreated not just from their home, but from any semblance of a hopeful future, leaving behind only the lingering scent of despair. Alara and Kaelin, now enveloped in their shared, miraculous secret, simply watched him go, a closed chapter finally sealed. The news of Alara's pregnancy transformed Kaelin, the quiet, stoic general, who had faced down countless dangers without flinching, became a man consumed by a tender, fierce protectiveness. His gaze softened whenever it fell upon Alara, a new warmth replacing the lingering shadows of his past trauma. He read every book Alara brought home about expectant mothers, meticulously tracking her diet and ensuring she rested. He would spend long evenings simply resting his hand on her burgeoning belly, feeling for the slightest flutter, a silent, profound conversation between a father and his unborn child. Alara found immense joy in this tender transformation, her heart swelling with a love that transcended their pragmatic beginnings. This was not just a husband. This was her partner, her protector, the unwavering pillar of their new life. Their son, Linus, arrived with the spring, a tiny, squalling bundle that instantly captivated Kaelin. From the moment he held his son, an almost animalistic devotion flared in his eyes. He learned to change diapers with surprising efficiency, sang off-key lullabies that somehow soothed Linus to sleep, and spent hours just observing the infant's every breath, every twitch. Kaelin, the decorated war hero, found his greatest challenge and greatest reward in the simple, profound act of fatherhood. He became fiercely protective, not just of Linus but of Alara, ensuring she had time to rest, to pursue her own burgeoning ambitions. He saw her, not just as his wife, but as the mother of his child, the architect of their happiness, and his respect for her grew boundless. His days were now meticulously planned around their son's schedule, his military discipline repurposed for the demands of a growing family. Every night, no matter how late, he would check on Linus, a gentle hand brushing the baby's forehead, a soft murmur of affection escaping his lips. He was the doting father Alara had only dreamed of, embodying a love so pure, it healed the last vestiges of her own past hurts. While Kaelin embraced his new role with unwavering dedication, Alara's mind, ever keen and pragmatic, turned to the future. The small savings she had accumulated, coupled with Kaelin's steady income, provided a comfortable foundation, but Alara envisioned more. Armed with her innate business acumen and an understanding of urban fashion trends she'd gleaned from discarded magazines, she began sketching designs in the quiet hours. Her first small shop, nestled in a bustling street of the city, started as a modest venture, selling meticulously crafted blouses and dresses. She poured her heart and soul into it, spending long days at the market sourcing fabrics, sketching new designs late into the night, and personally attending to every customer. Her designs, blending traditional elegance with modern, practical silhouettes, quickly garnered attention. Women, tired of the drab uniformity, flocked to her shop, drawn by the quality and unique flair. Kaelin, though initially reserved about her small business, became her quiet, steadfast supporter. He would drop off meals, listen patiently to her daily anecdotes, and even, on occasion, offer shrewd advice on logistics or supplier negotiations, drawing from his military experience. He watched with a profound sense of pride as her single shop blossomed into two, then three, each one more successful than the last. Alara's name, once whispered with skepticism in the compound, was now spoken with admiration throughout the city. her innovative marketing displaying her designs on mannequins rather than relying solely on verbal descriptions revolutionized the local fashion scene. Soon, demand outstripped supply, forcing Alara to take a bold leap. She established her own garment factory, employing women from the compound and surrounding villages, providing them with fair wages and a sense of purpose. Her Alara collection became a nationally recognized brand, synonymous with quality, style, and empowerment. She was no longer just Kalin Vance's wife. She was Alara, the visionary entrepreneur, a force of nature who had built an empire from scratch. Concurrently, Kalin's military career soared to new heights. Reinstated with honor and fueled by a newfound sense of purpose and the unwavering love of his family, he approached his duties with a renewed vigor and clarity. His strategic brilliance, once dulled by despair, now shone brightly. He commanded with authority, yet tempered with the compassion Alara had reawakened in him. His tactical insights during crucial exercises earned him rapid promotions. From a wheelchair-bound, despairing soldier, he rose steadily through the ranks, his reputation for integrity and decisive leadership growing with each passing year. He became a respected general, his uniform adorned with new commendations, his presence commanding admiration. Yet, despite the accolades and the increasing demands of his position, he never forgot the foundation of his strength, Alara and Linus. He often said that his greatest victory wasn't on any battlefield, but in the quiet strength of his family. Their home, once a stark and lonely abode, now hummed with life, laughter, and the warmth of a truly loving family. Alara and Kalin, the pragmatic couple united by circumstance, had forged an unbreakable bond, a partnership of equals where love and mutual respect flourished. Their son, Linus, grew into a bright, cheerful boy, adored by both parents, thriving in an environment rich with affection and security. Their story became a legend in the compound, a testament to resilience, the power of love, and the extraordinary heights two determined individuals could reach when they built a life together, proving Alara's choice, once met with doubt and scorn, to be the wisest and most fulfilling decision of her life. Their happiness was not merely a state of being. It was a flourishing legacy, built brick by brick, heart by heart. The grand hall of the military headquarters buzzed with the dignified hum of celebration. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off polished metals and the crisp uniforms of high-ranking officers. At the podium, General Kalin Vance, his presence commanding and his eyes reflecting a profound inner peace, accepted his newest promotion with humble gravitas. Beside him, radiating quiet elegance, stood Alara, her hands subtly resting on their son Liam's shoulder. Liam, a strapping young man on the cusp of adulthood, bore a striking resemblance to his father, his gaze filled with pride. Their life was a tapestry woven with success, respect, and an unshakable love, a testament to choices made against all odds. As the ceremony concluded and the reception began, Alara and Kalin moved through the throng, accepting congratulations. Liam, excusing himself, headed towards an outer courtyard for some fresh air. It was there, amidst the manicured bushes and the distant strains of celebratory music, that he first saw him. A figure huddled near the service entrance, rummaging through a discarded box of catering waste. The man was a ghost, gaunt and stooped, his clothes tattered and grimy, his face a canvas of despair and neglect. A thick, unkempt beard obscured what might once have been sharp features, and his eyes, bloodshot and hollow, darted nervously like a hunted animal's. Liam, momentarily startled, watched as the man pulled out a half-eaten bread roll, devouring it with desperate urgency. Just then, Alara and Kalin joined him. Kalin's arm naturally went around Alara's waist, a gesture of ingrained tenderness. Alara's gaze, sweeping the courtyard, landed on the vagrant. For a brief, almost imperceptible moment, a shadow flickered in her intelligent eyes, not of pain, but of a distant, academic recognition. The vagrant, alerted by their presence, looked up, his movements jerky and fearful. But then, his eyes widened, fixing on Alara. A spark of something akin to incredulity, then desperate hope, ignited within their depths. He straightened, stumbling forward, a grotesque parody of his former self. "Alara? Is that truly you?" His voice was a raw, croaking whisper, utterly devoid of the charming cadence it once held. It was Damien Thorn. His approach was frantic, a desperate lurch towards a past he believed he could still touch. "Alara, please, I knew you'd find me. I knew you'd remember. Look at me, what I've become. It was all Lyra. I swear. She ruined everything. She manipulated me. If only you had stayed." He extended a trembling, grimy hand, as if to grasp her sleeve, tears carving dirty tracks down his face. "Please, Alara, forgive me. I've never stopped regretting. We could still. You were always the only one." Alara didn't flinch. Her expression remained serene, her posture unwavering. There was no anger, no bitterness, not even a flicker of pity in her gaze. It was the calm, detached observation of someone witnessing a stranger's misfortune, a past event she had long since filed away. She didn't withdraw her hand from Kaelin's, nor did she lean into him for protection. She simply existed, complete and unburdened, in Damien's desperate presence. Her silence was a profound, unyielding wall. Kaelin's jaw tightened, his arm protectively encircling Alara more firmly. His voice, usually warm when speaking to his wife, was now a low, steel-edged command. "Guard! Remove this man from the premises immediately." 2 uniformed guards materialized instantly, responding to the general's tone with practiced efficiency. They moved towards Damien, who recoiled, still pleading, his words dissolving into choked sobs as they gently but firmly escorted him away. He was dragged past them, still mouthing Alara's name, a pathetic figure fading into the background of their brilliant future. Alara watched him go, then turned her gaze back to Kaelin, a soft, loving smile gracing her lips. She squeezed his hand. Liam, who had witnessed the entire, surreal interaction, looked from his father to his mother, a silent question in his eyes. Alara met his gaze, her smile deepening, a silent reassurance that all was well. The past, in its most wretched form, had attempted to intrude, and had been unequivocally, effortlessly dismissed. With Kaelin's hand still at her waist, and Liam walking proudly beside them, Alara turned and re-entered the hall, the sounds of celebration washing over them. The vagrant figure, Damien Thorn, was already a distant, irrelevant memory, a shadow that had dared to graze their light but had been utterly, eternally eclipsed. Her heart was full, not with the triumph of vengeance, but with the quiet, profound peace of a life meticulously rebuilt, rich with true love, unwavering loyalty, and the boundless potential of a future untainted by the ghosts of what once was.